And so he did. For though none knew it at the time, the clubfoot went directly to see Snake when the council was dismissed, and told him of the king's intent to grant him all he had requested and murder him later, when the war was done. And when the old man would have stormed out sword in hand to exact a bloody vengeance, Lord Larry soothed him with soft words and smiles. There is a better way, he said, counseling patience. And thus did he spin his webs of deceit and betrayal, setting each against the other. Whilst plots and counterplots swirled around him, and enemies closed in from every side, Aegon too remained oblivious. The king was not a well man. The burns he'd suffered at Rook's Rest had left scars that covered half his body. Mushroom says they had rendered him impotent as well. Nor could he walk. His leap from Sunfire's back at Dragonstone had broken his right leg in 2 places, and shattered the bones in his left. The right had healed well, Grand Maester Orwyle records, not so the left. The muscles of that leg had atrophied, the knee stiffening, the flesh melting away until only a withered stick remained, so twisted that Orwyle thought his grace might do better were it cut away entirely. The king would not hear of it, however. Instead he was carried hither and yon by litter. Only toward the end did he regain the strength to walk with the aid of a crutch, dragging his bad leg behind him. In constant pain during the last half-year of his life, Aegon seemed to take pleasure only in contemplating his forthcoming marriage. Even the capers of his fools never made him laugh, we are told by Mushroom, the foremost of those fools, though, his grace did smile from time to time at my sallies, and liked to keep me by his side to lighten his melancholy and help him dress. Though no longer himself capable of sexual congress due to his burns, according to the dwarf, Aegon still felt carnal urges, and would often watch from behind a curtain as one of his favorites coupled with a serving girl or lady of the court. Most often Tom Tangletong performed this task for him, we are told. At other times certain knights of the household took the place of dishonor, and thrice Mushroom himself was pressed into service. After these sessions, the fool says, the king would weep for shame and summon Septon Eustace to grant him absolution. Eustace says nothing of this in his own account of Aegon's final days. During this time King Aegon II also commanded that the dragon pit be restored and rebuilt, commissioned 2 huge statues of his brothers Aemond and Daron. He decreed they should be larger than the Titan of Bravos, and covered in gold leaf, and held a public burning of all the decrees and proclamations issued by the Dayfly kings Tristan Truefire and Geemon Palehair. Meanwhile, his enemies were on the march. Down the neck Camcregan Stark, Lord of Winterfell, with a great host at his back, Septon Eustace speaks of 20,000 howling savages in shaggy pelts, though Munkin lowers that to 8,000 in his true telling, even as the Maiden of the Vale sent off her own army from Gulltown. 10,000 men, under the command of Lord Leowen Corbray and his brother Sir Corwin, who bore the famous Valyrian blade called Lady Forlorn. The most immediate threat, however, was that posed by the men of the Trident. Near 6,000 of them had gathered at Riverrun when Elmo Tully called his banners. Sadly, Lord Elmo himself had expired on the march after drinking some bad water, after only 49 days as Lord of Riverrun, but the lordship had passed to his eldest son, Sir Kermit Tully, a wild and headstrong youth eager to prove himself as a warrior. They were 6 days' march from King's Landing, moving down the King's Road, when Lord Boros Baratheon led his Stormlanders forth to meet them, his strength bolstered by levies from Stokeworth, Rosby, Hayford, and Duskendale, along with 2,000 men and boys from the stews of Flea Bottom, hastily armed with spears and iron pot helms. The 2 armies came together 2 days from the city, at a place where the King's Road passed between a wood and a low hill. It had been raining heavily for days, and the grass was wet, the ground soft and muddy. Lord Boros was confident of victory, for his scouts had told him that the rivermen were led by boys and women. It was nigh unto dusk when he spied the enemy, yet he ordered an immediate attack, though the road ahead was a solid wall of shields, and the hill to its right bristled with archers. Lord Boros led the charge himself, forming his knights into a wedge and thundered down the road at the heart of the foe, where the silver trout of Riverrun floated on its blue and red banner beside the quartered arms of the dead queen. His foot advanced behind them, beneath King Aegon's golden dragon. The Citadel names the clash that followed the Battle of the King's Road. The men who fought it named it the Muddy Mess. By any name, the last battle of the Dance of the Dragons would prove to be a one-sided affair. The longbows on the hill shot the horses out from under Lord Boros's knights as they charged, bringing down so many that less than half his riders ever reached the shield wall. Those that did found their ranks disordered, their wedge broken, their horses slipping and struggling in the soft mud. Though the Stormlanders wreaked great havoc with lance and sword and longachet, the Riverlords held firm, as new men stepped up to fill the place of those who fell. When Lord Baratheon's foot came crashing into the fray, the shield wall swayed and staggered back, and seemed as if it might break, until the wood to the left of the road erupted with shouts and screams, and hundreds more rivermen burst from the trees, led by that mad boy Benjamin Blackwood, who would this day earn the name Bloody Ben, by which he would be known for the rest of his long life. Lord Boros himself was still a horse in the middle of the carnage. When he saw the battle slipping away, his lordship bade his squire sound his war horn, signaling his reserve to advance. Upon hearing the horn, however, the men of Rosby, Stokeworth, and Hayford let fall the king's golden dragons and remained unmoving. The rabble from King's Landing scattered like geese, and the knights of Duskendale went over to the foe, attacking the Stormlanders in the rear. Battle turned to rout in half a heartbeat, as King Aegon's last army shattered. Boros Baratheon perished fighting. Unhorsed when his destrier was felled by arrows from Black Alley and her bowmen, he battled on afoot, cutting down countless men at arms, a dozen knights, and the lords Maester and Derry. By the time Kermit Tully came upon him, Lord Boros was dead upon his feet, bareheaded. He had ripped off his dented helm, bleeding from a score of wounds, scarce able to stand. "Yield, sir," called the Lord of Riverrun to the Lord of Storm's End, "the day is ours." Lord Baratheon answered with a curse, saying, "I'd sooner dance in hell than wear your chains." Then he charged straight into the spiked iron ball at the end of Lord Kermit's Morningstar, which took him full in the face in a grisly spray of blood and bone and brain. The Lord of Storm's End died in the mud along the King's Road, his sword still in his hand. When the ravens brought word of the battle back to the Red Keep, the Green Council hurriedly convened. All of the sea snake's warnings had proved true. Castle Rock, Highgarden, and Aldtown had been slow to reply to the king's demand for more armies. When they did, they offered excuses and prevarications in the place of promises. The Lannisters were embroiled in their war against the Red Kraken, the Hightowers had lost too many men and had no capable commanders. Little Lord Tyrell's mother wrote to say that she had reason to doubt the loyalty of her sons Bannerman, and, being a mere woman, am not myself fit to lead a host to war. Sir Tyland Lannister, Sir Marston Waters, and Sir Julian Wormwood had been dispatched across the narrow sea to seek after sellswords in Pentos, Tyrosh, and Myr, but none had yet returned. King Aegon II would soon stand naked before his enemies, all of the king's men knew. Bloody Ben Blackwood, Kermit Tully, Sabbatha Frey, and their brothers in victory were preparing to resume their advance upon the city, and only a few days behind them came Lord Cregan Stark and his Northmen. The Bravo Sea fleet carrying the Arryn host had departed Gulltown and was sailing toward the Gullet, where only young Alan Valerion stood in its way. And the loyalty of Driftmark could not be relied upon. "Your Grace," the sea snake said, when the rump of the once proud Green Council had assembled, "you must surrender. The city cannot endure another sack. Save your people and save yourself. If you abdicate in favor of Prince Aegon, he will allow you to take the Black and live out your life with honor on the wall." "Will he?" King Aegon said. Munkin tells us he sounded hopeful. His mother entertained no such hope. "You fed his mother to your dragon," she reminded her son. The boy saw it all. The king turned to her desperately. "What would you have me do?" "You have hostages," the Queen Dowager replied. "Cut off one of the boy's ears and send it to Lord Tully. Warn them he will lose another part for every mile they advance." "Yes," Aegon II said. "Good. It shall be done." He summoned Sir Alfred Broom, who had served him so well on Dragonstone. "Go and see to it, sir." As the knight took his leave, the king turned to Corlys Valerion. "Tell your bastard to fight bravely, my lord. If he fails me, if any of these Bravo Sea pass the Gullet, your precious Lady Baela shall lose some parts as well." The sea snake did not plead, or curse, or threaten. He nodded stiffly, rose, and took his leave. Mushroom says he exchanged a look with the clubfoot as he went, but Mushroom was not present, and it seems most unlikely that a man as seasoned as Corlys Valerion would act so clumsily at such a moment. For Aegon's day was done, though he had yet to grasp it. The turncloaks in his midst had put their plans in motion the moment they learned of Lord Baratheon's defeat upon the King's Road. As Sir Alfred Broom crossed the drawbridge to Maegor's Holdfast, where Prince Aegon was being held, he found Sir Perkin the Flea and 6 of his gutter knights barring his way. "Move aside, in the king's name," Broom demanded. "We have a new king now," answered Sir Perkin. He put a hand upon Sir Alfred's shoulder, then shoved him hard, sending him staggering off the drawbridge onto the iron spikes below, where he writhed and twisted for 2 days as he died. In that same hour, Lady Baela Targaryen was being spirited away to safety by agents of Lord Larys the Clubfoot. Tom Tangletong was surprised in the castle yards as he was leaving the stables, and beheaded forthwith. He died as he had lived, stammering, says Mushroom. His father Tom Tanglebeard was absent from the castle, but they found him in a tavern on Eel Alley. When he protested that he was just a simple fisherman, come to have an ale, his captors drowned him in a cask of same. All this was done so neatly, swiftly, and quietly that the people of King's Landing had little or no inkling of what was happening behind the walls of the Red Keep. Even within the castle itself, no alarum went up. Those who had been marked down for death were killed, whilst the rest of the court went about their business, undisturbed and unawares. Septon Eustace tells us that 24 men were killed, whilst Munkin's true telling says 21. Mushroom claims to have witnessed the murder of the king's food taster, a grossly fat man named Umate, and asserts that he was forced to hide in a barrel of flour to escape the same fate, emerging the next night, floured from head to heels, so white the first serving girl to see me took me for Mushroom's ghost. This smells of story. Why would the plotters wish to kill a fool? Queen Alicent was arrested on the Serpentine steps as she made her way back to her chambers. Her captors wore the seahorse of House Valerion upon their doublets, and though they slew the 2 men guarding her, they did no harm to the Dowager Queen herself, nor to her ladies. The Queen in chains was chained again and taken to the dungeons, there to await the pleasure of the new king. By then the last of her sons was already dead. After the council meeting, King Aegon II was carried down to the yard by 2 strong squires. There he found his litter waiting, as was customary. His withered leg made steps too difficult for him, even with a crutch. Sir Giles Belgrave, the Kingsguard knight commanding his escort, testified afterward that his grace seemed unusually fatigued as he was helped into the litter, his face, grey and ashen, sagging, yet instead of asking to be carried back to his chambers, he told Sir Giles to take him to the castle sept. Perhaps he sensed his end was near, Septon Eustace wrote, and wished to pray for forgiveness for his sins. A cold wind was blowing. As the litter set off, the king closed the curtains against the chill. Inside, as always, was a flagon of sweet Arbor Red, Aegon's favorite wine. The king availed himself of a small cup as the litter crossed the yard. Sir Giles and the litter bearers had no notion aught was amiss until they reached the sept, and the curtains did not open. "We are here, your grace," the knight said. No answer came, but only silence. When a second query and a third produced the same, Sir Giles Belgrave threw back the curtains, and found the king dead upon his cushions. There was blood upon his lips, the knight said. Elsewise he might have been sleeping. Maesters and common men alike still debate which poison was used, and who might have put it in the king's wine. Some argue that only Sir Giles himself could have done so, but it would be unthinkable for a knight of the Kingsguard to take the life of the king he had sworn to protect. Umate, the king's food taster whose murder Mushroom claims to have seen, seems a more likely candidate. Yet whilst the hand that poisoned the Arbor Red will never be known, we can have no doubt that it was done at the behest of Larry Strong. Thus perished Aegon of House Targaryen, the second of his name, firstborn son of King Viserys the First Targaryen and Queen Alicent of House Hightower, whose reign proved as brief as it was bitter. He had lived 24 years and reigned for 2. When the vanguard of Lord Tully's host appeared before the walls of King's Landing 2 days later, Corlys Valerion rode out to greet them with Prince Aegon somber at his side. "The king is dead," the sea snake announced gravely, "long live the king." And across Blackwater Bay, in the gullet, Lord Leowen Corbray stood at the prow of a Bravo Sea cog and watched a line of Valerion warships haul down the golden dragon of the second Aegon and raise in its place the red dragon of the first, the banner that all the Targaryen kings had flown until the dance began. The war was over, though the peace that followed would soon prove to be far from peaceful. On the 7th day of the 7th moon of the 131st year after Aegon's conquest, a date deemed sacred to the gods, the High Septon of Alltown pronounced the marriage vows as Prince Aegon the Younger, eldest son of Queen Rhaenyra by her uncle Prince Daemon, wed Princess Jaehaera, the daughter of Queen Helaena by her brother King Aegon II, thereby uniting the 2 rival branches of House Targaryen and ending 2 years of treachery and carnage. The dance of the dragons was done, and the melancholy reign of King Aegon III Targaryen had begun.